Hello, everybody. Welcome to Hines Legal's Friday webinar series. I am your host for today, Chris Irons, Strata Advisor, former Commissioner for Body Corporate and Community Management. With me, as always, Frank Higginson, partner, Hines Legal. Frank, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
I can see the comments today. We've already got some questions popping up, which is great.
Happy days, happy days. So you can indeed ask questions today. Fire away. We will get to as many of them as we can in our session today. Just post a question on Facebook. Don't forget to like and share. And as I said last week, the more like and share, the more chance we have of getting topics that are tailored to what you want to hear. This week, we're going to delve into body corporate managers. Frank, it's fair to say an absolutely integral part of the body corporate puzzle, and yet one that can have some issues, can't they?
Absolutely. You know, it's well, they're a bit like lawyers in the sense that they're not compulsory. It's certainly far more needed than lawyers are in strata. And inevitably, mate, these things worry me a little bit because we are, without doubt, going to offend some strata manager who will chop up either you or me next week on email saying, why did you say this? And I suppose part of it for us is really, the reality is that things are what they are. So we're out there talking to people about them, good, bad or indifferent, and there it is. But yeah, mate, I think it's really interesting. If you go back through the history of strata, like body corporate managers were only really recognised in a sense in our strata legislation in 1997 in Queensland. Before that, they were sort of they fell out of the back of the accounting firms doing the financial administration. And it has absolutely turned into a proper profession and a proper industry. But by the same token, and mate, dare I say it, this is probably one thing where we are completely different. No one went to school wanting to grow up to be a commissioner for body corporate and community management. And likewise, there is no natural career path for body corporate managers. You know, there is for lawyers, accountants, all those traditional sort of things, but body corporate managers come from all sorts of places.
That's right. That's right. I've got to say, in my 5 years as commissioner, the vast majority of body corporate managers I encountered were professional, committed, focused on attention to detail, and always super keen to try and resolve things. And it makes sense that that's the case because, as I said before, if you're playing such an integral role in things, you'd want things to keep moving along smoothly. That said, and as Frank just alluded to, sometimes problems arise. And so today we're just going to delve into some of those, how they come about. We're going to go over some of the periphery, some of the sort of the landscape of body corporate managers, and then we're going to sort of delve into, well, what can be done? How do you go about trying to rectify the situation? We're also going to try and delve into things from the body corporate manager's perspective also. Bit risky, as Frank said, but what the hell? Let's take the risk. First of all, big dir of a question, Frank, but what is a body corporate manager?
You'd almost call them a professional sort of administrator or body corporate secretary. I mean, back under Bugta, the body corporate manager traditionally held the role of secretary because they were normally voted on the committee in that capacity. That changed when BCCM arrived. So for me, probably the best way to sort of look at it is record keeper, administrator, financial manager, collator of all of the minutiae that is the management of body corporate, record keeping, access to records, delivery of information to owners, and probably be a bit of a facilitator in the relation to owners in the committee, the resident manager, instructing lawyers and that sort of stuff. So they are a very key part of a body corporate's life, and you couldn't possibly, I wouldn't do it for all the tea in China.
No,
in a sense,
me neither.
It's just extraordinary that what they put up with. And what I say to particularly management rights clients from time to time is, and even lawyers, we come to work, click up on a sheet on Monday and you've got 15 emails over the weekend and away you go. A body corporate manager that might have 60 buildings and 60 committees and inevitably 60 people in those individual buildings that aren't happy with what's going on, they might turn their computer on, they got 150 emails from the weekend. And every single one of them is as important to the person that sent it as the next one, and they've got to try to navigate all that.
That's right. That's right, Frank. So body corporate managers are appointed by contract, and they are appointed by vote at a general meeting. So those are two really important points to note. What they do and what they don't do, and then also what their costs are, all vary according to the different managers and their different agreements. But there will be an agreement. It will be in writing. Like any agreement that you enter into, it's always pertinent to seek some advice about it before you enter into it.
I suppose it won't be any longer than 3 years. Most of them sometimes go for 1, and there's sort of some requirements around spending limits where you might need to put up alternate quotes if you go above certain time periods or amounts. But,
That's right. Yeah. Do we need a body corporate manager? And the answer is no. No, it is not compulsory to have a body corporate manager. However, and there's a big however on this one, isn't there, Frank?
Yeah. Well, the same as you don't need a lawyer. Sometimes you should get experts in to do what experts do. And mate, we see it every other day. I've said it before, 188,000 words in the Body Corporate and Community Management Act and related modules. Even when people ask us questions, we're still, and Chris and I did a webinar yesterday for some body corporate managers, and we've still been emailing each other afterwards about what about this and that. And so this is all we do, and yet we're still going back to the legislation to try to understand it. And we're in the game doing it all day, every day. If you're not in the game, which is a volunteer committee, which you absolutely can put your hand up to do it all, I think you'd be nuts. There's just so much you can get wrong.
If you're maybe a really, really small scheme, like 2 or 3 lots, you maybe could get away with not having a manager. That's assuming that everybody there has got the time and the will, I should say, to conduct affairs. But even then, I've seen plenty of 2 and 3 lot schemes who absolutely 100% need a body corporate manager. So while it's not compulsory, the reality is that the vast majority of schemes in Queensland will have a body corporate manager, simply because of that fact that we just said about that. For the vast majority of people, being in a body corporate is secondary to the rest of their life. Somebody needs to take the responsibility of ensuring compliance with things, and things are actually getting done. That can be the body corporate manager's job. Are they licensed? No, they're not. There's no licensing regime for body corporate managers. So one of the professions that's most closely aligned to a body corporate manager is a real estate agent. I think everybody in Queensland has dealt with everybody watching this and in Queensland would have dealt with a real estate agent at some point in some capacity and would know that they are very, very heavily licensed. Those same requirements don't apply to a body corporate manager. It's fair to say, though, Frank, that scenario is under a fair bit of scrutiny at the moment, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's certainly been on the radar for a long time. And I suppose the 2 arguments, and certainly one did an SCA AGM at one stage where Jared Blay at that stage was the Attorney General before Campbell got unceremoniously booted shortly after ascension to the Queensland Parliament throne. And what he was saying was that he was loath at that stage in terms of the red tape reduction to impose more red tape on industry. One of the other arguments I've heard is that it doesn't actually, in a sense, prevent poor behaviour. And in that sense, you can put your hand up and look at the legal profession from time to time, is we're also very heavily regulated. We go get university degrees, continuing professional development. I've got to go do a practice management course to be the practice director of a law firm. Yet people still do go and take money from trust accounts and not give clients the right advice. And I mean, I suppose you look at the criminal law practitioners that might be on the front page of the Courier Mail or the Sunday Mail from time to time. It shows that regulation doesn't necessarily prevent bad behaviour, but and the SCA is certainly pushing for that. I think, Chris, you've been part of those delegations talking to both sides of Parliament about it.
Yeah, that's right. And so I think it's a case of watch this space. I don't think I doubt there'd be anybody corporate manager out there who would not say that they want to be seen as a professional, well-regarded industry. So then it's about what is the best way of achieving that. And there are various ways to achieve that. So watch this space. One of the common questions I got asked as commissioner, or my office got asked as commissioner, is was there a body corporate ombudsman, or was there an ombudsman looking over body corporate managers? And the answer is no, there's not. Commissioner's office is not an ombudsman, and there's actually not much scope to take action in relation to a body corporate manager in the Commissioner's office either. So the closest that we come to is an organisation called the SCA in Queensland, not-for-profit body, which is the peak body for body corporate managers. You don't have to be a member of that organisation, but many, many managers are.
It's a bit like the REIQ, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the Queensland Law Society, you don't have to be a member of the Law Society to be a lawyer, but most are.
That's right. Before we go on a bit further, there's a question here I just want to address because it's relevant to what we've been talking about from Mel. Thanks for watching, Mel. Are body corporate managers expected to advise the committee about regulations? That's a great question. How would I answer that? That's not.
Delicately.
Yeah. It's not a specific part of their duties, but the primary relationship is between the committee and the body corporate manager. So it's the committee and the body corporate manager who have that day-to-day interaction about decision making. So you would think that there would certainly be a capacity for a manager to be, I'm loath to use the word advising in this case because that brings with it a certain kind of meaning. It's about, I think, the role of the manager is about pointing out some realities to a committee. Frank, what do you think?
Yeah, providing the right guidance. Now, that guidance might be, and I suppose when we see this a bit, and I suppose I get a little bit territorial here in a sense of sort of body corporate managers who see something go on in a particular building elsewhere, and then effectively sort of copy that advice in their own mind across to another building when it might not actually be predicated on the same set of facts. So what body corporate managers usually want to do is help. And how they help then really is always a question for them, because their agreement certainly won't oblige them to provide advice to committees about legal guidelines or legislation, as much as particularly experienced ones know a bucket load about it. So they might be able to say, well, you can't do that because of this reason or whatever. And I think for me, one of the things, and we're talking about this a little bit later on, Chris, we'll cover it off now, is where I think sometimes body corporate managers can go a little bit wrong, is they sort of get too deep in terms of trying to help people without actually recognising where the lines of demarcation are in terms of, hang on a minute, that's not where I should be going. I should be getting someone else to give that advice because they're exposed to take insurance. They know a lot about insurance because they deal with lots of insurance issues, but I don't give insurance advice because I'm not a qualified insurance advisor.
That's right. That's right. Back as commissioner, one of the red flags for me and my staff was whenever we heard a body corporate manager talk about my committee, as in my committee will be doing this or my committee will not be doing this. That always told us that that manager was perhaps too involved or too attached to the situation. There's a very fine line between being professional and thorough and being too attached. And maybe that is where sometimes problems arise, which is a great segue, is it not, into what are the sorts of problems that we see. Some of these problems that we're going to list are actually applicable to both managers and committees and owners, I think. They go both ways. Probably the first and the biggest one is unrealistic expectations. The expectation from an owner or an occupier, for that matter, or a caretaker, that the body corporate manager can and should do something that really is not their job to do. And that is a case of making sure that people are educated about roles, clear understanding of roles. The body corporate manager does this. The caretaker, this. The committee, this one. It's that, to quote one of our good friends, Frank, it's that triangle effect of things. So unrealistic expectations is a start point. Another one that comes up quite a bit is a lack of transparency in process or a lack of openness or a lack of being forthcoming about things. While a body corporate manager is appointed by the body corporate, they're still there providing a service. And one of the great examples is in relation to records, I think, Frank, isn't it? Body corporate records, where a body corporate manager takes on a role they shouldn't take on.
Yeah, the protector of the realm, in a sense, because the body corporate manager is no different. I suppose their relationship with a body corporate is effectively the same as what ours is when we're lawyers. We're acting for them. We act on the instructions of the committee. It's not for us. If we're, having a blue with a lot owner for a body corporate acting for the committee, the lot owner doesn't email us and say, I want to do this, and we say, yeah, sure, we'll go for it. No, what we have to do is go back and actually get instructions, wait for the committee to actually make a decision and instruct us, and then we do things. And I think part of that unrealistic expectation, Chris, for me, is owners sort of emailing the body corporate manager and expecting outcomes when the body corporate manager can't necessarily wave a magic wand and make them happen, because it is subject to the committee's instructions. And I suppose that's one of the reasons we're doing these things, is to try to help people understand where roles and responsibilities start and finish, because that is a significant source of frustration.
But the flip side of that is also its own problem, Frank, which is not great responsiveness and not great communication. So I'm an owner and I send the body corporate manager an email with an issue that's really of some concern to me. No response, or a response in several weeks, that's usually a good way to continue to put somebody offside. So it's about thinking about what is the best way to respond, noting what you just said, Frank, that an instruction has to come from the committee about what to do. There's no reason, though, why there can't be an interim response.
No.
Got your email, noted, the committee is considering this issue, or whatever the case.
We helped one committee come up with a communication protocol which went out to all occupiers, not just owners, to say, this is, when you fire stuff in at us, this is how we're going to deal with it. So that everyone's expectations were set.
And that the flip side of that one is when you have an owner firing off a huge volume of emails to a manager and expecting a response in a nanosecond. Doesn't work that way. There's got to be realistic expectations on both sides. That's just a grab bag of some of the issues that come up with body corporate managers at times. With that in mind, what can you actually do if you think that you have a problem with a body corporate manager? Well, this is where you do not necessarily go to the Commissioner's office. You can go there to get a bit of information, but the Commissioner's office is not there to resolve disputes between a body corporate and a body corporate manager. The only real involvement they have is in return of records from a former manager in that particular situation. What you can do though, Frank, can't you, is if the body corporate manager is a member of the SCA, you can pursue something with them.
Absolutely. Go up the tree, and that's sort of really a complaint in a sense about whatever that particular issue was for the SCA then to adjudicate on. But the reality is that it's like everything in business, if there's difficult situations, and it happens from time to time where we don't get everything 100% right, as much as I'd love to say that we always do. And I think probably most, again, mate, would be, it's always going to be a bad apple or two everywhere, and that doesn't necessarily tar everyone with that same brush. But the reality is, if we do something wrong and people come to me, then I have a look at it and I try to deal with it. And I think body corporate management companies are the same, because some of them are big, moving beasts. So I suppose the spectrum of body corporate managers is Higginson Strata Management starts up tomorrow, up goes my shingle and away I go. I'm the one-man band doing everything. I do my own dictation and then type it like Marty in the castle. Dennis Denudo, sorry. I'm thinking of Marty back in Frontline days. First, the really big organisations that have branches all throughout Australia in effect, and hundreds of strata managers. And so inside that mess of people, I suppose, there's a range of different skill sets and abilities and understandings that won't necessarily always be consistent. But those bigger guys and girls do have owners, they do have branch managers. And my experience with that, when we've had clients with difficulties, is a conversation with the higher ups, usually about, hang on a minute, this wasn't the way we quite wanted this handled. And of course, handling it the right way instead of just going DEFCON 1 will usually produce an outcome.
That's right. Well said, Frank. Well said. Let's look at it from the flip side, though. If you're a body corporate manager and then you've got some issues with a particular body corporate or a committee or owners or occupiers, what can you do about it? Well, I think the very first thing is you set some clear parameters and behavioural expectations. So we won't tolerate this kind of language or these words or these types of communications. We have a service standard of X hours or X days or whatever the case may be in responding. And certainly if somebody oversteps the line, it needs to be pointed out that that's the case. And the same sort of... I'm not going to do it. I've sacked 2 clients for that sort of behaviour over my 20-odd years of practice, and I could still name them today, where people rang me crying, I just rang them and said, that is just not acceptable. Come collect your file. That's it. Go. Thank you. Yep. Another thing a manager can do, make sure you've got a defined point of contact. One of the things that I think can really overwhelm and make life very difficult for a body corporate manager and affect their ability to do their job is to be getting all manner of phone calls and emails from various people in the same building. There needs to be a very kind of focused, funneled point of contact, whether it be one committee member in particular, chairperson, secretary, liaison person, whatever. Maybe it's the caretaker. Maybe it's actually an occupier in some cases. I don't know. But it's whoever everybody agrees to and what works best for that particular building. You want everything funneled through a point. That works better. And the other thing that I think a manager can and should be doing is referring everyone to do the free online training course that my former office provides. It's technically for committee members, but it applies to absolutely everyone. And you should be, if you've got a particular building with owners who are a bit problematic, refer them off to that, get them to do it as a first port of call. I think that's how it should be done. So how to fix? Frank, what can be done to fix a problem between a body corporate manager and body corporate?
Well, I think the starting point, I suppose, like for me, every legal issue, the more you deal with them, is the same. It's sort of a now, where, how. Where are we now? Where do we want to get to? How do we get there? And the now is the starting point, is to actually understand what the problem is, and ideally to try to understand what the legal position actually is. If you're going to have an argument about the validity of the contract, the performance of the particular issue, whether something could be charged or otherwise, you need to understand what the agreement or the law actually says. And I mean, that's where Chris's former office is a wonderful resource for everyone. Free call number, 1300, ring it, ask, get free advice. After that, you can actually then make a considered decision about what it is that you want to do and how you actually want to approach the problem. But just in this environment, in this market, the capacity for bush lawyering is extraordinary. And there's even a question there, Chris, when owners write emails referring to precise areas of the Act, is it a realistic expectation to receive a response? And my response to that is not necessarily. Like, I think there's an assumption that every single email a body corporate gets must be responded to, and that's not the case. And when people get legalistic, for one better phrase, and start throwing around sections of legislation and demanding responses and this, that, the other, I don't think that actually, the question is, what is the problem? What do we actually want?
That's right.
Is it engaging about section 1162B of the Act says, or is it something else?
And it's that classic distinction, isn't it, Frank, between decision and discussion. Do you want something actually acted upon, or do you want to open a dialogue or a discussion about something? Big difference between the things when it comes to body corporate world. I have put up there the link to the Commissioner's Office free online training, because I think getting informed about stuff is absolutely the way to go in all situations. I did a mediation not too long ago where one of the outcomes was all of the committee was going to undertake that free training. So, it's a really good system. I recommend everybody do it. And I had nothing to do with writing that one either, Frank, so there's no vested interest.
Anyone who starts with us, I ask them to do it.
Exactly.
Even non-legal staff, because this is what we do for a living. You might as well educate yourself.
Yep. I think you need to be realistic about timeframes and outcomes. So if a good example of that is if you're a lot owner and you are intending to undertake some improvements, which then start to encroach, I got it right that time, Frank, onto common property, it's probably not a good idea to be emailing the body corporate manager about it the day that the tradies arrive to start work and seek approval at that point. You need to be realistic about timeframes in which you want something done. The flip side also applies, though, for a body corporate manager. If there's something there that needs to be acted upon quickly, and an emergency situation is one of those, and there are abilities to follow up emergency situations in the Commissioner's Office, that should be followed up at that point. This one's a bit aspirational, but I think it's a good one. Try and put yourself in each other's shoes. If you're an owner, put yourself in the shoes of a body corporate manager. How many buildings would your everyday body corporate manager manage, do you think, Frank, in their portfolio?
Well, I think they've all got different ways to share them around, as I understand it. Some will be pure number of lots, some will be number of committees, some will be based on size, but I would have thought that almost every strata manager would have somewhere between 50 and 100 buildings under their belt, usually.
So, yep. And so if you're an owner, think about that for a moment. The manager who you really want a response from is also dealing with that same demand on their time from potentially 50 multiplied by however many lots are in each building. So you've got to be realistic, and you've also got to be focused. What is it that you're actually wanting? Again, I come back to my point, decision versus discussion. Be realistic about what you want and when it is required. And I think that at the end, the final thing, Frank, is you've got to remember, this is a contract, isn't it? And so if you have a problem with a contract, Frank, what do?
Get legal advice, Chris.
Funneling communication is that. I think it works in most situations. You're quite right. It may not work in all of them. I'm talking here about trying to get things focused and narrowed so that nothing gets missed in the process. That's what I was talking about. Joy, a couple of questions which don't really relate to body corporate managers, but I'll try and answer them anyway. Your first question, if it's a challenge to a decision of a general meeting, that's adjudication, not conciliation, typically. I say typically. And secondly, can you circulate a copy of the motion that was omitted and give that to all owners? Yeah. Be careful that you're not spreading anything defamatory in the process. That's all I would say.
The motion would have disclosed a serious deficit in the budget, so I don't know if that's necessarily a motion as much as it is a statement of opinion or fact.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's not asking owners to vote. And again, without seeing it, it's hard to comment. But my take would be, if you want to circulate something that is your opinion about the financial affairs of the body corporate, and that's independent of the AGM, you can get the body corporate roll, which isn't protected by privacy, and circulate that off your own bat.
Yep, definitely. We have reached the end. Frank, gosh, that flew, didn't it? Look, I think, to me, the sum up point I'd make is that because it's such an important relationship, the body corporate manager and the body corporate, it's really worth investing the time and effort to get well informed and well apprised of what is involved. It just makes life that much easier moving forward. As I said before, you don't want to have to deal with it after the event. It's just a bit late there. Any sort of parting thoughts from you, Frank?
No, it's interesting actually. So when I've talked to clients really with, changing body corporate managers or trying to pick a new one, for me, part of it is a relationship type thing. You're actually going to effectively be engaging with someone for 1, 2 or 3 years to provide services. It's not the same as, again, come back to engaging a law firm. You don't want to have someone acting for you who you don't like. So I think it is a bit of a personal thing like that as well. So the contract to me is a follow-on. You want to deal with someone who, in a sense, you respect, who talks the way you talk, who engages with you the way you want to be engaged with, and go from there. Agreed.
Well said, Frank. Well said. We're going to have to wrap it up there, everyone. Thank you again. Some really good engagement and good questions today. And lest anybody think that we're picking on one particular segment, we're going to try and do this kind of format on a semi-regular basis, but try and go through all of the different players in a body corporate as well. So it's not just managers. So beware, everybody gets a turn. Frank?
Including body corporate lawyers, maybe, I don't know.
or ex-commissioners. No, yeah. Okay, well, with that, Frank, thank you.
No worries. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thanks, everyone. Don't forget to like and share. We'll see you next week in a slightly different form. That's all I'll say at the moment. Bye-bye.
Bye.